Hare Krishna. All glory to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Guru. Hare Krishna. Welcome everyone to this morning's Bhagavatam class. We're reading from Canto 3, Chapter 14, titled Pregnancy of Diti in the Evening, and verse number 35. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Text, Canto 3, Chapter 14, verse number 35, which is on the board. Namo Rudraya Mahate Deva Yograya Midushe Shivaya Dandaya Dhrita Dandaya Manyave. Namo Rudraya Mahate Deva Yograya Miduse Shivaya Dandaya Dhrita Dandaya Manyave. Namo Rudraya Mahate Deva Yograya Midushe Shivaya Dandaya Dhrita Dandaya Manyave. Namaha, all obeisances unto Rudraya, unto the angry Lord Shiva. Mahate, unto the great. Devaya, unto the demigod. Ugraya, unto the ferocious. Miduse, unto the fulfiller of all material desires. Shivaya, unto the all auspicious. Nyashtadandaya, unto the forgiving. Dhrita Dandaya, unto the immediate chastiser. Manyave, unto the angry. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Abhay Chandra Ravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Translation. Let me offer my obeisances unto the angry Lord Shiva, who is simultaneously the very ferocious great demigod and the fulfiller of all material desires. He is all auspicious and forgiving, but his anger can immediately move him to chastise. Purport. Diti prayed for the mercy of Lord Shiva very cleverly. She prayed, "The Lord can cause me to cry, But if he likes, he can also stop my crying, because he is Ashutosha. He is so great that if he likes, he can immediately destroy my pregnancy. But by his mercy, he can also fulfill my desire that my pregnancy not be spoiled. Because he is all auspicious, it is not difficult for him to excuse me from being punished, although he is now ready to punish me because I have moved his great anger. He appears like a man, but he is the Lord of all men. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Tapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Shute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tirubhascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. I'll read the translation again. Text number 35. Let me offer my obeisances unto the angry Lord Shiva, who is simultaneously the very ferocious great demigod and the fulfiller of all material desires. He is all auspicious and forgiving, but his anger can immediately move him to chastise. So here we see, as following to the series of verses, Kashyapa was, in one sense, as I'll just read in that verse, he understood, he paid obeisances to fate and he performed the act, and then after that, Diti here has understood what's actually happened, and here she's trying to offer prayers to Lord Shiva, because prior to that, Daksha was explaining to her the consequences of what can happen if we were to have a union at this forbidden time, and most importantly because this time is inauspicious because it's presided by certain associates of Lord Shiva, and it could spell disaster for all of us. So here she's in her mind she's convinced that something has happened, and now she's trying to rectify the situation by offering suitable prayers. So here in this verse we see some contradictions. Even though Lord Shiva is angry, but he fulfills all material desires. He's auspicious and forgiving, but his anger can immediately move him to chastise. So just to picture it, right? If someone is very angry, will you go and ask them, hey, can you help me with this situation? Naturally, that person wouldn't be that compelled to do so. But here we see there are certain contradictions here about Lord Shiva, but actually, as we were discussing yesterday, that adds to his glory. So she's saying here, even though you're very angry, but I'm appealing to the other side of you. You're all compassionate, you're all forgiving side. So please consider my plea. In fact, as I was reading this and I was listening to a talk by His Holiness Ramapada Swami, he was discussing on the same verse, and he drew a parallel between this pastime and another pastime that takes place in the 4th canto, which is a conversation between anyone? No, it's a bit earlier than that. Yes, it's related to that, but just prior to that. Sati and Shiva. There's a conversation happening between Sati and Shiva, and obviously what's happening there is slightly different to here, but the context is similar. As we know, Daksha offends Shiva because Shiva in that assembly doesn't get up to acknowledge the presence of Daksha, and Daksha feels offended and he says so many insulting words. Although we were discussing that even though he's speaking such insulting words, Acharyas decode that that's the glorification of Lord Shiva. So there's some tension that's brewing between Shiva and Daksha, and Sati is aware of it. However, on one occasion, Daksha just arranges for a big yajna, and there are invitations sent out to all the different beings in the universe, and then they're all coming to Daksha's sacrifice, and as they're coming through, they're actually passing through the abode of Lord Shiva and Sati sees and sees, wow, what's happening? And we are as different personalities are passing by, they're giving her the news. Oh, didn't you know there's a big festival happening at your father's place? And the big yajna there, and she sees all the ladies very beautifully dressed, going with their husbands, and she immediately has a desire within her own heart to go there. So she goes up to Lord Shiva, and again, as Maharaj was describing, how you can clearly see how cultured and how educated, elevated, you see the personalities of Shiva, of Sati, and in deity here, that they're offering prayers which are actually coming from their training. So even though here it's described in the first verse, Diti prayed for the mercy of Lord Shiva very cleverly. So she knew exactly what to ask or how to approach the situation. So Sati, when she first finds out, she goes up to Shiva and she says, my dear husband, such and such is happening, but if you so desire, I can come along with you. Not saying I want to go, but if you so desire, then I can come along with you. So she starts off with that. And then obviously Shiva sitting there, okay, what's going to happen next? What are you going to tell me next? Then she says, my dear Lord, even though you are Aja. Aja is one who has realized his eternal transcendental position. She says how wonderful is this material cosmos, which is working by the interaction of these three material modes of nature. And you are Aja, you are not affected by it, but I am affected by it. So she tells Lord Shiva, you are Aja, you have realized your transcendental position. For you, this doesn't really matter, In fact, you're not even affected by honor, dishonor, and so on. But I am. And I am under these modes, even though she's the personification of material energy. Even though I am, and I'm please requesting, please, let's go for this event. So she tries that, and then again, Lord Shiva is unmoved, he's not saying anything. Then she addresses him as Abhava. So if you refer to the verses go from Canto 4, Chapter 3, starting from text 8 is when Sati is speaking to Shiva. So from text 8, she first says, I want to go. If you so desire, then we can go. Then she says, even though you're untouched by material contamination, please, but I'm not. And then she says, I remember you once drank the ocean of poison for the benefit of others. You're known as Nilakantha. You undertake all kinds of inconveniences for the benefit of others. So please honor my request. Lord Shiva was unmoved. Then coming to where she addresses him as Abhava. Abhava means one who is never born. Bhava means one who takes birth. So Abhava is one who's never born, even though Lord Shiva appears from the between the eyebrows of Lord Brahma, at least in that aspect. So she says, you Abhava, you have no relatives, you are equal to everyone, so please try and, fulfill my request. Then after hearing all these statements from Sati, Shiva then finally starts to speak. And he says that, thank you, my dear wife, you've said all this. However, and then he, similarly in the mood of Kashyapa, who's, they start describing the facts, what these are the consequences that are going to come. Then Shiva starts describing the consequences that, yes, it's true, what she tells, even though she knows what he knows is right, she knows very well that there's some tension brewing between the two, and it's not appropriate to go if you're not invited. Just imagine if you rock up to someone's home uninvited. Majority of the times, the reception may not be that wonderful. So she knows that he knows, and they both know what's right, but still, she's persuading him to go. So then Shiva says, okay, that's fine, but consider this: one should not go to one's friend, parent, or a relative if one has offended that person and if you're not invited. So you should not go there. And actually this is all described in the 3rd chapter. Then he says that even if you go to a loved one, for example, a parent will always be merciful towards one's child, and he will not, he or she will not really bear any grudges toward that person. But if in their mind they're too disturbed, then it is not ideal to go there. Then he says, when you go there, because of your relationship with me, and he addresses her as Dakshayani. Dakshayani is the daughter of Daksha. He tells, because you're related to me, you will not get that respect that you are looking for. Then finally he concludes by saying, look, I don't want you to go. But you may go if you so desire. And then at that time, Sati is torn between her husband and her father, and she manifests anger. Her lips are through her lips, she's just waiting to see what happens next, and she just gets up and leaves to go to her father's sacrifice. And at that time, Shiva sends his associates to accompany her. So similarly here, we see in this pastime where Kashyapa, so Maharaj was describing, it's not that Kashyapa and Lord Shiva are acting like henpecked husbands, they're just doing whatever, but they very well know what the consequences are. In this instance, that Kashyapa paid obey, in verse number 31, he says, understanding his wife's purpose, he was obliged to perform the forbidden act. And thus, after offering his obeisance unto worshipful fate, he laid with her in secluded place. So he offered obeisance to worshipful fate. That means he knows that there is some plan of the Lord in which he has to play a part. And similarly with Lord Shiva. And Maharaj was describing this, that it's a very delicate topic of those that are under our care or, are taking some guidance. Where do you draw that line of saying no to someone? And he was saying in one instance of Srila Prabhupada Hari Shori Prabhu was describing this, that Srila Prabhupada had given a talk somewhere, and somehow or the other there was this one devotee who had this idea of doing some sort of mundane music as and blending that with something to do with his service to Srila Prabhupada. And Srila Prabhupada spoke very strongly about that in that Sangha where he was addressing devotees. And 2 days later, the same devotee who was actually had this idea came with his newly wedded wife, and he offered obeisance to Srila Prabhupada, and he said, "I'm here to seek your blessings to take on this service, and I'll be doing this." And Srila Prabhupada said, "Yes, you may so." And Hari Shori Prabhu was there at that time, and he said, "Prabhupada, just 2 days ago, you just spoke so strongly against it." Prabhupada said, "It would have been worse if I would have said no, and he would have still done it." So it's a very delicate thing. So here we see with Shiva, he's explained all the consequences, and he very well knows what's about to happen. But again, doesn't say anything. And similarly, we also see in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna telling Arjuna, "Now you've heard this transcendental knowledge from me, please utilize your intelligence." And all that Arjuna says, "Karichet vachanantava," I'll do as you desire. So Sati then heads off to the yajna, and there, as predicted earlier by Lord Shiva, she does not get that respect, and her father does not even acknowledge her presence there. She's welcomed by her mother and her sisters, and when she's doing so, she feels just torn at her heart by the reaction of her father. And she says something very, very interesting, which I would like to describe, because just 2 days ago we celebrated the disappearance day of Srila Madhavendra Puri, and my Guru Maharaj Giriraj Swami was describing this pastime of Sati and how it linked up to the pastime of Madhavendra Puri. So if we refer to Canto 4, Chapter 4, verse number 13, Sati speaking to Daksha. "It is not wonderful for persons who have accepted the transient material body as the self to engage always in deriding great souls. Now listen to this, such envy on the part of materialistic persons is very good, because that is the way they fall down. They are diminished by the dust of the feet of great personalities." So I'll read that again. "Such envy on the part of materialistic persons is very good, because that is the way they fall down. They are diminished by the dust of the feet of great personalities." So, what she's telling, even though we understand that envy is bad, especially envy towards great personalities, but here she's saying such envy is good. And this was vividly described in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where we find Ramachandra Puri, one of the associates, or one of the personalities in Chaitanya Leela. He had this habit of inviting people for prasadam, and he would just keep feeding them, and after he's fed them, then he starts criticizing them. And he did the same with Lord Chaitanya, so much so that then Lord Chaitanya reduced his eating, and at the very moment that Ramachandra Puri left town, then he resumed again. So there's the discussion, how did Ramachandra Puri develop such an offensive mentality? And it is stated that Ramachandra Puri was actually the disciple of Madhavendra Puri. So Ishwara Puri was actually his god brother. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu looked up to him, offered him that, as per the etiquette, offered him respects because he was the god brother of his spiritual master, Ishwara Puri. So Ramachandra Puri would then, it is described towards the last days of his life, Ishwara Puri was crying and lamenting in separation from Krishna. And Ramachandra Puri was there, and he said, "My dear spiritual master, why are you lamenting? Just think of Brahman." And Maharaj said that, in Bhagavad Gita we find certain verses, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma Na Sochati Na Kankshati. One does not desire or lament for Brahman. So he's thinking that Brahmachandra Puri is thinking of the lamentation of of Ishvara Puri to be on the mundane platform. And he's instructing him, my dear spiritual master, why don't you think of Brahman? And at that very moment, Ishvara Puri criticizes him and just rebukes him. You fool, just get away from here. I don't want to see your face. In one instance, Srila Prabhupada had a disciple named Aravinda. And he was actually very close, he was serving Srila Prabhupada very intimately. And after a while, he just left. And after some time, he came, devotees found him and they said, oh, Srila Prabhupada is here, why don't you come and see him? And he came up to Srila Prabhupada and he said, Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was trying to encourage him to come again. And he said, actually, Krishna consciousness never really worked for me. So in one sense, he was criticizing Srila Prabhupada. He was criticizing Krishna consciousness, he was criticizing Srila Prabhupada. And he said, it doesn't really work for me. I don't think it's something that I can benefit from. And Srila Prabhupada said, yes, that's good that you've been away because I wouldn't have to see your morose face. Srila Prabhupada speaking so strongly, even though generally a spiritual master never rejects a disciple, but Srila Prabhupada was speaking in such a way that, speaking very strongly. But again, within his heart, Srila Prabhupada always had that desire to bring his disciple back. So similarly with Ramachandra Puri, even though Ishvara Puri rebuked him. And on the other hand, we find the example of Madhavendra Puri, of Ishvara Puri. How he served Madhavendra Puri, he did such menial services for him, and he put aside all other considerations, but engaged his heart fully in serving his spiritual master. So how you have two examples so the example of Ramachandra Puri that's described is that if one does not have the purity and comes too close in touch with a great personality, there is that possibility of one developing that that offensive mentality. And because Ramachandra Puri was so heavily influenced by the dry Mayavad philosophy that, that's essentially what came out in his dealings with his spiritual master, due to which his spiritual master rebuked him. So we have two examples of Madhavendra Puri and Ramachandra Puri. And those two examples are there for us to learn that we have to be very careful and we have to really pray to develop that sort of purity to come, to be able to serve such personalities. So in the case of Sati, she's saying it's actually good that envy is good because that's what will cause these people to fall down. So even though the spiritual master will never reject a disciple, but Krishna, for the benefit of that particular person, of that particular soul or jiva, will arrange for a situation where this personality goes away or keeps at a distance, which will help this person to then come to their senses and understand what sort of offenses were they making. If they were, because the spiritual master is all forgiving, and in his heart he would want the disciple to be there, but if the disciple is there, he or she would actually commit more offenses, which will actually slacken their devotional service. So it's actually all arranged by the Supreme Lord for it to work in such a way that they actually learn their lesson. So that's what Sati is saying. That's why envy is good, because that will cause them to fall down, and that's what will help them, by the mercy of others, or the Vaishnava, the spiritual master, and the super soul within, to hopefully someday come to their senses. So that's something I would like to share from this verse, and especially to do with how Lord Shiva is very, we see such contradictions here, but at the same time he is the topmost devotee of the Lord. And because tomorrow is Gaur Purnima, I just thought of sharing some glorification of Lord Shiva in connection with Lord Chaitanya. So I was fortunate enough to get this book a few years ago. And in here, Bhakti Vinod Thakur describes how there are 9 dvipas, and one of them is Sri Rudra Dvipa, which is obviously, it's coming from the word Rudra. So Rudra is one of the names of Lord Shiva. Rudra means anger. So this prayer by Bhakti Vinod Thakur that I'd just like to read. So he described Sri Rudra Dvipa. This island represents Sakhyam, being a friend. In his Navadvip Bhavataranga, Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur describes, after honoring the prasad given by Draupadi at Mahatpura, when will I come to Rudra Dvipa? Kailash, the abode of Shiva. So he says Kailash, the abode of Shiva, is just the effulgence of this Rudra Dvipa, which shines within Navadvip. So Kailash is just a little reflection of Rudra Dvipa. At this place, the 11 Rudras, headed by Nila Lohita, dance and become stunned with Gora Prema. Durvasa Muni set up his ashram here and gave up his practice of yoga to worship Gauranga's lotus feet. Other yogis, headed by Ashtavakra and Dattatreya, as well as Panchamukha Shiva, gave up the monastic philosophy and engaged in meditation on the lotus feet of Gauranga. No longer do they desire to merge with the effulgence of the Lord. This is again Bhakti Vinod Thakur speaking. When will I wander in the forest and come to the place of the Shiva Linga? Sitting there, I will meditate on Gauranga's lotus feet and then see a beautiful goddess nearby. When she notices me, I will pay my respects and ask, Mother, what is your name? With tears in her eyes, she will reply, Listen, son, my sorrow is impossible to comprehend. There are 5 types of liberation, and I have been given the name of Sayujya or Nirvana. My 4 sisters, Salokya, Sarupya, Samipya, and Sashti, have gone to Vaikuntapura, leaving me here embarrassed. By the mercy of Shiva, Dattatreya, and other sages, gave me their earnest attention for some time. But finally, they gave me up. And people say they took up residence in Rudradvipa. I am now looking for them hopelessly. Where and when will I find them? Gauranga has liberated everyone, but is merciless to me. Therefore, I will find a place to give up my life. That place is called Nidaya, merciless. Just hearing her name, Sayujya, my heart will tremble as if in fear of the witch Putana. Due to overwhelming fear, I will close my eyes and drop to the ground. Then a great person will touch me, and I will rise and see before me the figure of Shiva, dancing and crying out, O merciful son of Sachi, give mercy to all living entities, drive away all fear. I will fall at Mahadev's feet and pray for my own purification. He will mercifully place his feet on my head and give me the essence of all teaching. Listen, devotion to Sri Krishna is the essence. Striving for jnana, karma, yoga, and mukti is useless. By my mercy, you will conquer Maya and quickly attain the shade of Gaura's lotus feet. To the south, behold Sri Pulina, so attractive. This is Vrindavan within Navadvip. So Pulina is the Vrindavan within Navadvip. Go there to witness Krishna's pastimes, and soon you will attain Radha's lotus feet. After instructing me, Shiva will disappear. I will bow down and then continue on crying all the while. After viewing Sri Pulina for some time, I will fall unconscious to the earth with my voice choked and a gargling sound coming from my throat. So, why is the island named Rudradvipa? It is described here. The village Radupura is situated on the eastern side of the Ganga. Some people also call this place Rudrapura. Rudradvipa is said to be divided into 2 portions. One portion is on the eastern bank of the Ganga, and the other portion is on the western bank. Due to the movement of the Ganga, sometimes the portion of the western side of the Ganga moves to the eastern side and vice versa. Thus, the exact location of the various places is difficult to ascertain. Sri Ishana Thakura, during his parikram with Srila Srinivasacharya, came to this place and gave the following explanation. This place is known as Radhupura, but previously it was called Rudradvipa. This village of Radhupura has since disappeared, and now only some uninhabited land remains. I will now tell you why this place was known as Rudradvipa. Sri Rudradeva was very happy within his heart knowing that Sri Gaurachandra would appear in Nadia. Rudradeva along with his followers became mad while describing the glorious qualities of Lord Gauranga. All around him was the sound vibration of drums and various other instruments. Maheshwara was dancing ecstatically with various bodily movements. By the weight of Rudra's every step, the earth was shaking. Who would not become impatient to have darshan of that dance? Who would not dance when Lord Rudra is dancing? From heaven the demigods started to sprinkle flowers. Happiness increased within the hearts of all the demigods who said, now all living entities will be free from all kinds of suffering. Before the appearance of the Lord, Rudradeva is chanting the glories of his birth. This means the Lord will appear in Nadia very soon. Our hearts will be filled with happiness to witness the birth pastimes of the Lord. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai. So tomorrow, as I said, being Gaura Purnima, we see how these different personalities are ecstatically welcoming Lord Chaitanya. So we too, following in the footsteps, do everything possible to not only welcome Lord Chaitanya here in the temple, but also welcome him in our hearts. And that's only possible by serving those great personalities. My Guru Maharaj said to get the mercy of Krishna, one needs to get the mercy of Radharani. To get the mercy of Radharani, one needs to get the mercy of Lord Chaitanya. To get the mercy of Lord Chaitanya, you need to get the mercy of Lord Nityananda. But to get the mercy of Lord Nityananda, you need to go and approach personalities like Jagai and Madai. So we go and approach all such people out in Sydney and wherever we can, and ask them to chant Gauranga. And that's what will please Gauranga most. So, yeah, so just wanted to share a few things. If anyone has any questions or comments, reflections. Yes, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so in that same chapter, later on, it is Prabhupada writes in the purport that Sati, even though she spoke those words to appease Lord Shiva to be able to come there, but actually she came to Daksha to sing the glories of Lord Shiva and try to help him to come to his senses. She was coming there primarily to straighten up her father, to tell her that, what you've done is wrong. In one sense, she's telling him, she tells him that even though Daksha finds, or in his mind or in his heart, he says that Lord Shiva is very inauspicious because, he hangs around in crematoriums, he does all these things. But then she also tells him, but personalities like Lord Brahma, Brigu, Marichi, they actually come and worship Lord Shiva. They actually garland Lord Shiva and they take the dust of the feet of Lord Shiva. So she's telling that to Daksha, and she's telling them that Brahma worships Lord Shiva. Brahma, Daksha has been given the title of progenitor from Lord Brahma. So she's telling even your boss is worshipping Lord Shiva. So why do you have such hatred for him? So personalities greater than you are worshipping Lord Shiva. So even though when she's there, she's actually, her mood is just to somehow or the other, help her father understand the position of Lord Shiva. So Prabhupada writes in the purport, even though her intention was to attend at least what she described to Lord Shiva, but actually she went there to, you can say, come for some sort of conflict resolution. And the moment she found that it didn't work, because she said this body is connected to you because you gave birth, so I don't need this body, so she commits suicide. So that's what Prabhupada writes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. Yeah, so that's what I read in the very beginning. That is describing friendship, Sakyam. Thank you for action. Okay. Grantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Nita Go Premanandi. Srila Prabhupada ki.